Mrs. Collins, according to science, the man you call your husband cannot possibly be the father of the baby you're carrying. Blood drained from my face as if someone had severed my aorta. My ears rang with a high-pitched whine. The clinic darkened, then became too bright, the world around me tilting wildly. I tried to stand, but my knees buckled before I even realized I was moving. "That's impossible, and there must be a mistake," I stammered, one hand clutching the armrest, the other protectively cradling my 16-week pregnant belly as if shielding my baby from the truth being exposed. The genetic counselor pushed a box of tissues toward me that I hadn't realized I needed, tears already streaming down my face. She turned her computer screen toward me, pointing at numbers and charts as if they could explain why my entire life had just collapsed on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday afternoon. "With your A-negative blood type and your husband's O-positive, the baby having these genetic markers is biologically impossible," she explained, her voice professional yet compassionate. "We've double-checked to be certain." Nausea hit so violently I lurched up, diving for the nearby trash can, heaving up my lunch while the counselor placed a hand on my back. When I looked up, the room was still spinning, but one horrifying truth had come into unbearable focus. James wasn't the father of this baby. So who was the man who had actually conceived this child I was carrying? And how could I bring this news home? Look into the eyes of the man who had planned for this baby with me for months, who kissed my belly each night and whispered loving words to the child he believed he had created. How could I tell my husband I was carrying another man's baby, when I didn't even know when it happened, with whom or how? After the counselor helped me regain enough composure to leave her office, I sat in my car for nearly an hour, unable to drive, unable even to put the key in the ignition. My hands shook so violently that I dropped my phone twice trying to cancel my afternoon appointments. Rain began pattering against the windshield, matching the tears that wouldn't stop flowing down my face. This pregnancy had been planned, meticulously so. James and I had been trying for 8 months, tracking ovulation, timing intercourse, doing everything by the book. When the test finally showed positive, we had celebrated with sparkling cider and a special dinner. He had been so happy, so proud. Now everything we had built together was balanced on the edge of a precipice. I drove home in a daze, muscle memory navigating familiar streets, while my mind raced through impossible scenarios. There must be some explanation. A lab error. A rare genetic anomaly. Something, anything other than the obvious conclusion. But the counselor had been clear. With my blood type and James's, certain genetic markers in our baby were scientifically impossible. They had run the test twice to confirm. The evidence was irrefutable. I pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine, staring at the house James and I had purchased 2 years ago with a future family in mind. The nursery upstairs was already painted a soft sage green, waiting for furniture we'd planned to buy this weekend. Every corner of our life together had been constructed around a lie I hadn't even known I was living. My phone buzzed with a text from James. "How was the appointment? Everything still perfect with our little bean?" Fresh tears blurred my vision. Our little bean. Except it wasn't ours at all. What was I supposed to say? How do you even begin to have this conversation? I typed back a vague response about being tired and needing to lie down, then dragged myself into the house. Once inside, I went straight to our bedroom, closed the blinds against the gloomy afternoon light, and curled around my slightly rounded belly, whispering apologies to the innocent life growing inside me, a life whose very existence had just shattered everything I thought I knew. I must have fallen asleep from emotional exhaustion because I woke to the sound of the front door closing. James was home. My heart began racing so fast I felt lightheaded. I couldn't face him, not yet. Not until I understood what had happened. Because the truth was, I had no memory of being with anyone other than my husband. No recollection of any infidelity. No explanation for how I could be carrying a child that wasn't his. The cognitive dissonance was so extreme, it felt like my mind was splitting in two. I pretended to be asleep when James quietly entered the bedroom, feeling his gentle kiss on my forehead before he left me to rest. His tenderness only amplified my panic. Tomorrow, I would need to begin searching for answers. But tonight, I let myself grieve for the simple, happy life that had existed this morning, a life that was now gone forever. James and I met 5 years ago at a charity fundraiser for children's cancer research. I was volunteering at the registration table. He was representing his investment firm, which was sponsoring the event. He spilled red wine on my white blouse, mortified and apologetic, insisting on paying for dry cleaning. His sincerity and the way he looked at me, as if truly seeing me, had been irresistible. Our courtship was everything I'd dreamed of after years of dating disappointments. James was thoughtful, ambitious without being obsessive, and openly enthusiastic about building a family. We married after 18 months of dating, bought our house a year later, and spent the next 2 years establishing our careers before deciding to try for a baby. The past 8 months of attempting to conceive had brought us even closer. James researched fertility-boosting foods, downloaded ovulation tracking apps, and even switched from briefs to boxers without complaint. When my period was late and the test showed positive, he had tears in his eyes as he knelt to kiss my still flat stomach, whispering hello to our future child. Our marriage wasn't perfect, none are, but it was solid. We had the normal disagreements about household chores and spending priorities, but communication had always been our strength, or so I believed. Looking back with newly suspicious eyes, there were subtle signs I'd dismissed. James traveled frequently for work, 1 or 2 overnight trips most months, though nothing excessive for a financial consultant. He'd been going more often over the past year, explaining it as expanding client relationships in neighboring states, which aligned with his recent promotion. There was one business trip about 4 months before I got pregnant. James had been gone for 3 days to Philadelphia. When he returned, something felt different. He was more attentive, bringing me flowers and suggesting weekend getaways. At the time, I'd appreciated this renewed romantic attention, never questioning its origins. But even as I grasped for possible betrayals in our history, nothing made sense. I couldn't recall any suspicious incidents, any unexplained absences during my fertile window. We had been actively trying to conceive. The timing made no sense. Unless a memory surfaced from approximately 16 weeks before my current gestation date. James had been home, but we'd had a significant argument about his mother's increasingly frequent unannounced visits. He'd stormed out, returning hours later with an apology and peace offering. We'd made up physically, but the encounter had been brief, emotionally charged. But there was another memory from that same week, something I'd completely forgotten until now. My college friend Kevin had been in town for a conference. We'd met for dinner while James was working late. Kevin and I had always been close, platonic friends since freshman year. He'd gone through a difficult divorce the year before, and that night he'd been vulnerable, emotional. We'd shared several bottles of wine, talking until the restaurant closed. I remembered Kevin walking me to my car, hugging me goodbye. I remembered the comfort of his familiar presence, the way I'd lingered in his embrace longer than usual. I remembered nothing else. The next morning, I'd awakened in my bed with a crushing hangover, James already gone for work. I'd assumed I'd driven myself home, but now, with this devastating new information, gaps in my memory became terrifying abysses. Had something happened with Kevin? The very thought seemed impossible. We'd been friends for 15 years without a hint of romantic involvement. He lived in Boston, only visiting Chicago occasionally for work. He was the person who'd given a heartfelt toast at our wedding, for God's sake. But as I laid in bed, pretending to sleep while James moved quietly around the house, the possibility refused to be dismissed. I needed answers, and there was only one person who might have them. I told James I didn't feel well the next morning. Not a lie, just a devastating understatement. He was concerned, offering to stay home, but I insisted he go to work. I couldn't bear his loving attentiveness, not with the terrible questions swirling in my mind. As soon as he left, I began what felt like detective work in my own life. I created a timeline, working backward from my conception date based on the ultrasound dating. I checked our joint calendar, credit card statements, phone records, anything that might clarify what happened during that critical week. The first discovery came from our cell phone location history. During the night after my dinner with Kevin, my phone showed I hadn't driven straight home. Instead, I'd spent nearly 2 hours at the Westbrook Hotel downtown before returning to our house just after 1 a.m. James had indeed been home overnight according to his phone's location, eliminating one terrifying possibility, that he'd been away and I'd brought someone to our home. The second revelation appeared in our credit card statement, a rideshare charge from the restaurant to the hotel, and another from the hotel to our house. I hadn't driven at all that night, despite having my car. I'd been too intoxicated, responsible enough to not drive, but perhaps impaired enough for significant lapses in judgment. My hands trembled so violently that I knocked over my coffee mug, hot liquid spreading across the kitchen island where I'd laid out my evidence. As I mopped up the spill, sobs built in my chest until I could barely breathe. The mounting evidence pointed to a truth I couldn't bear facing. The third and most devastating discovery came when I gathered my courage and texted Kevin. My message was casual, just checking in, mentioning I'd been reminiscing about his visit months ago. His response seemed equally casual, but contained the confirmation I dreaded. "Great hearing from you. That was such a needed night for me. Been meaning to check how things are with you since, but figured you wanted space. You doing okay?" Since what? The deliberate vagueness pierced through any remaining denial. Something had happened between us, something significant enough that he thought I might want space afterward. With shaking fingers, I called him. When he answered, his tone shifted immediately upon hearing my voice. "Ellie, are you all right? You sound upset." "Kevin, I need you to tell me exactly what happened the night we had dinner when you were in Chicago." My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, tight, desperate. Silence stretched between us for several heartbeats. "You don't remember?" he finally asked, caution evident in his voice. "I remember dinner, wine, you walking me to get a ride share. I need you to fill in the rest." Another pause. "Ellie, we should have this conversation in person. I'm so sorry. I thought you were just choosing not to acknowledge it. I never realized you didn't remember." "Tell me now." The words came out harsh, demanding. He sighed heavily. "We were both pretty drunk. You said you didn't want to go home yet, that things with James had been tense. We got a rideshare to my hotel for another drink at the bar, but we never made it to the bar." His voice dropped lower. "Ellie, we slept together. You were clear about wanting it at the time, but afterward you became really upset, saying it was a terrible mistake. You left almost immediately." I dropped the phone. It clattered to the kitchen floor with a cold thud. Ellie, are you still there?" Kevin's voice echoed from the speaker, but I couldn't respond. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. We slept together. 7 simple words that connected all the dots, painting a horrifying picture I couldn't unsee. Kevin, my 15-year friend, James's groomsman, a man I had never viewed romantically, was telling me we had a drunken night I couldn't remember. A night that occurred approximately 16 weeks before I discovered I was pregnant. A night that explained why blood tests confirmed James, my husband, the man I loved, couldn't possibly be the father of the baby I was carrying. I sank to my knees, picking up the phone with trembling hands. "Kevin," I whispered, tears flowing uncontrollably. "I'm pregnant, and blood tests say James can't be the father." Silence stretched on the other end of the line, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing. "Oh my God," he finally spoke. "Ellie, does the timing match up?" "Perfectly," I said, nausea rising in my throat. "I'm carrying my best friend's baby, and I don't even remember how it happened." I sent James a text asking him to come home early, that we needed to talk. My body felt disconnected from reality as I sat in our living room waiting, hands folded over my stomach, rehearsing words that could never adequately convey this situation. When he walked through the door, concern immediately crossed his face. What's wrong? Is it the baby? Something cracked inside me at his genuine worry. This man who wanted to be a father, who had celebrated each milestone of this pregnancy with me. In some parallel universe, a version of me existed who never went to dinner with Kevin, who was carrying James's child, whose life wasn't shattering into irreconcilable pieces. "You should sit down," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. He complied, perching on the edge of the sofa across from me. "You're scaring me, Ellie." I took a deep breath. I had my appointment with the genetic counselor yesterday. "Right, how did that go? Everything okay?" "No, James, everything is not okay." I met his eyes directly. The counselor found an inconsistency with the baby's genetic markers. "Based on your blood type and mine, you cannot possibly be this baby's biological father." His expression cycled rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and then something darker. "That's ridiculous. There must be some mistake with the test." "I've confirmed it with a separate blood analysis." I kept my voice clinical, detached, the only way I could get through this. "It's scientifically impossible for a man with O-positive blood to father a child with these specific genetic markers." James stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back. "So what are you saying? That you've been having an affair?" His voice rose with each word. "That you've been cheating on me while we've been actively trying to have a baby?" "No," I said quietly, "not an affair." "Then what?" he demanded. "There was one incident, one night." I couldn't meet his eyes now. "I was drunk, James. More drunk than I've ever been. I don't even remember it happening." "Who?" The single word contained volumes of pain and fury. "Kevin." He froze, disbelief washing over his features. "Your friend Kevin? The guy who was in our wedding?" I nodded, tears finally breaking through my composed facade. "It was when he visited 4 months before I got pregnant, the night we had that fight about your mother." Something shifted in James's expression. Recognition, then a flash of guilt quickly suppressed. It was so brief I almost missed it. "You were drinking with him that night?" His tone had changed subtly. "Yes, you were working late. We had dinner, too much wine." I wiped at my tears. "James, I don't remember much of it. I know that doesn't excuse anything, but—" "Stop!" He held up his hand. "Just stop talking for a minute." He walked to the kitchen, returning with a glass of water he didn't drink, just held between his hands as if needing something to ground him. "This makes no sense," he finally said. "We were trying for a baby. We had sex regularly during your fertile window." Apparently not during the actual ovulation day of that particular month. "And you expect me to believe you just happened to sleep with your friend once, got pregnant from it, and have no memory of the encounter?" His voice hardened with each word. "How convenient." Anger flared through my grief. "Don't you dare make this sound calculated. I've been devastated since finding out. I've been trying to understand what happened myself." "I can't believe this." He set the glass down with controlled precision. "Our whole marriage, our plans for a family, destroyed because you got drunk and fucked your friend." The crude language felt like a slap. James rarely swore, especially not at me. "I know there's nothing I can say to make this right," I whispered. "You're damn right about that." He stood again, unable to stay still. "So what now? Are you leaving me for him? Is that why he's suddenly in the picture again?" "No, I haven't even spoken to him in months. I only called him today after I found out about the paternity issue." "And let me guess, he's thrilled to be a father?" Sarcasm dripped from every word. "He's coming to Chicago to talk. He deserves to know, James." "And what about what I deserve?" His voice broke, the first crack in his anger revealing the pain beneath. "I've built my life around us, around the family we planned together." My heart shattered at the raw emotion in his eyes. For a moment, we just stared at each other across an unbridgeable divide. both victims of circumstances neither of us fully controlled. I don't know what happens next, I admitted. I just know I couldn't keep this from you. James moved toward the door, grabbing his keys from the entry table. Where are you going? I asked, rising awkwardly from my seat. Out. I can't be here right now. He paused, hand on the doorknob. I need to think. James, please, can we talk about this? Try to figure it out together? He turned back, his expression now alarmingly empty. Figure what out, Ellie? How to raise another man's child? How to look at you without seeing betrayal? Some things can't be figured out. They can only be endured. The door closed behind him with a quiet click more devastating than a slam. Through the window, I watched him sit in his car for nearly 10 minutes, head resting on the steering wheel, before finally driving away into the rain-swept streets. I sank to the floor, wrapping my arms around my middle, protecting the baby who was the innocent result of a night I couldn't remember, with a man I'd never considered romantically while married to someone else. As thunder raged outside, I finally allowed myself to completely break down, guttural sobs tearing from my throat until I was hoarse and gasping. When my phone chimed with a text notification, I almost didn't check it. The message was from James. Don't wait up. Staying at Mark's tonight. It felt like the beginning of the end. James didn't come home the next day, or the day after. My calls went straight to voicemail. Texts received only minimal responses confirming his safety, but nothing more. With each passing day, the silence between us calcified into something that felt increasingly permanent. Meanwhile, Kevin arrived as promised. We met at a neutral coffee shop, both of us uncomfortable, struggling to reconcile our 15-year friendship with this new, complicated reality. He looked both familiar and like a stranger, the same Kevin who'd helped me move apartments in college, who'd listened to my relationship woes before James, now sitting across from me as the father of my unborn child. I want you to know I'll support whatever decision you make, he said, after we'd moved past the initial awkwardness. Financially, emotionally, whatever you need. I don't know what I need, I admitted. Everything I thought I knew about my life has imploded. Have you thought about what you want to do about the pregnancy? He asked carefully. I placed my hand protectively over my belly. I'm keeping the baby. That's the one thing I'm certain about. Relief washed over his features. I'm glad. And I want to be involved, Ellie. I know this isn't how either of us planned to become parents, but now that it's happening... He trailed off. You live in Boston. I'm in Chicago. My marriage is likely over. Nothing about this situation is simple. I know, but we can figure it out. He hesitated. I should tell you, there's no one serious in my life right now. I'm not bringing additional complications to the table. I nodded, grateful for at least that small mercy. Kevin, I need to ask, did you use protection that night? He looked down, embarrassed. We started to, but in our condition, it wasn't used properly. I'm so sorry, Ellie. I should have been more responsible. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I'd been on a break from birth control while trying to conceive with James, the perfect storm of circumstances. Kevin stayed in Chicago for 3 days. We talked through practical considerations, tentative co-parenting frameworks, the awkward logistics of building a new relationship as parents rather than just friends. He attended my next prenatal appointment, visibly moved when hearing the heartbeat. I watched his eyes widen with wonder and terror in equal measure, a reaction I recognized from my own first appointment. When James finally returned home, he found me packing a suitcase. "What are you doing?" he asked from the bedroom doorway, looking haggard and unshaven. "Giving you space. I'm going to stay with my sister for a while." I folded another shirt, not meeting his eyes. I think we both need time to process. "You're leaving." His flat tone made it an accusation rather than a question. "James, you haven't been home in 5 days. You've barely communicated with me. What exactly am I supposed to do?" "Not run to your sisters, not give up on our marriage after one conversation." I stopped packing, turning to face him fully. I'm not giving up. I'm acknowledging reality. This situation is impossible. And whose fault is that? He snapped. Mine. Obviously mine. Tears threatened again. I seem to cry constantly these days. But placing blame doesn't solve anything. So Kevin came to town. Not a question. Yes. And you two have it all figured out? Your cozy co-parenting arrangement? Nothing is figured out, James. Everyone's lives have been upended. We're all just trying to get through each day. I sat heavily on the edge of the bed. He's gone back to Boston. He's looking for job opportunities here in Chicago. James leaned against the doorframe, suddenly looking exhausted beyond his years. Do you have feelings for him? No, this isn't some star-crossed romance, James. It was one drunken mistake with severe consequences. He nodded slowly, processing. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few days. And I don't know if I can be the man who raises another man's child, especially not when that man will be actively involved. His voice was quiet, resigned. I'm not built that way, Ellie. I wish I was more evolved, more capable of separating my ego from the situation, but I'm not. Though I'd expected this answer, hearing it verbalized still felt like physical pain. I understand. Do you? He looked up, anguish evident in his eyes. Because I don't. I don't understand how any of this happened. I don't understand how we go from planning a family to this in the span of a week. Neither do I. The simple truth hung between us. James pushed away from the doorframe, walking to the window that overlooked our backyard, the yard where we'd discussed building a playset someday. I called a lawyer yesterday. The words hit me like physical blows. That was fast. Is there a reason to wait, to prolong this? I had no answer. I'll move out this weekend, he continued. You should stay here for now. It makes more sense with the pregnancy. His consideration, despite everything, only deepened my guilt. James, Don't. He turned back, eyes red-rimmed but dry. Don't say you're sorry again. Don't say you wish things were different. None of that helps. We existed in painful silence for several moments. For what it's worth, he finally said, I hope the baby brings you happiness. Children shouldn't pay for their parents' mistakes. With that, he left the room, and I heard the front door close moments later. I didn't follow him this time, knowing there was nothing more to say. Instead, I sat motionless on our bed, soon to be just my bed, as the weight of everything crashed down on me. The next few weeks passed in a blur of practical arrangements and emotional devastation. James moved into an apartment across town. Divorce papers arrived with terms so favorable to me that my lawyer seemed suspicious. We communicated only through necessary texts about house maintenance and dividing assets. Telling our families was its own special form of hell. My parents responded with stunned support, clearly struggling to reconcile their disappointment with their desire to stand by me. James's family simply disappeared from my life. Years of close relationships severed overnight. Friends awkwardly chose sides or disappeared entirely, uncomfortable with the messy reality of our situation. Kevin called daily, researching pregnancy and parenting with characteristic thoroughness, sending links to articles and books. He secured a job transfer to Chicago, planning to move just before the baby's arrival. His enthusiasm should have been comforting, but it only highlighted the contrast with what I'd lost. The partnership with James, the future we'd planned, the intact family I'd envisioned. My lowest point came at 24 weeks pregnant. I'd just left a doctor's appointment where I'd learned the baby was a girl. Sitting alone in my car in the hospital parking garage, I should have felt joy at this milestone. Instead, overwhelming grief consumed me. I sobbed until security checked if I needed medical attention, gasping out that I was fine when nothing could be further from the truth. That night, curled on the bathroom floor after being sick from crying so hard, I reached a depth of despair I'd never experienced. the cold tile pressed against my cheek. I found myself wondering if James and I might still be together in blissful ignorance if I'd never had that genetic screening, if the blood test hadn't revealed a truth that demolished our lives. For one dark moment, I hated the medical technology that had exposed this reality. For one darker moment, I hated the innocent child growing inside me who had been the unwitting catalyst. The realization of that thought, that I could even momentarily resent my baby, shocked me back from the edge. I placed both hands on my stomach, feeling a strong kick against my palm. "I'm sorry," I whispered to her. "None of this is your fault. I promise I'll figure this out for both of us." That night, rock bottom behind me, I finally began to imagine a way forward through the wreckage. Recovery from life implosion doesn't follow a tidy trajectory. There are no 5 stages to progress through systematically, no moment when grief neatly transforms into acceptance. Instead, healing came in fits and starts, small victories followed by devastating setbacks. My first step forward was accepting help. I'd always prided myself on self-sufficiency, but pregnancy combined with emotional trauma quickly proved this wasn't sustainable. When my sister offered to stay with me until the baby came, I swallowed my pride and accepted. When my company offered flexible work arrangements, I took them without guilt. When my doctor suggested therapy, I made the appointment instead of insisting I could handle it myself. The therapist, Dr. Landry, specialized in pregnancy-related trauma and life transitions. In our first session, she said something that fundamentally shifted my perspective. "You're experiencing multiple profound losses simultaneously: your marriage, your conception story, your planned family structure, your self-image. Grieving these losses doesn't diminish your love for your daughter. Both realities can exist together." Permission to mourn what I'd lost while loving what remained became my lifeline. I could sob over divorce papers in the morning and excitedly set up the nursery in the afternoon without contradiction. I could miss James desperately while developing a new co-parenting relationship with Kevin. I could acknowledge my responsibility for the situation while refusing to be defined solely by my worst mistake. Practically, life reorganized itself around new patterns. The divorce progressed with minimal conflict. James's initial anger seemingly burned out to resigned cooperation. We finalized everything by my 3rd trimester, the legal end of our marriage marked only by signatures on documents, no dramatic courthouse scene. Kevin found an apartment 10 minutes from mine, committed to being present without overwhelming me. Our relationship evolved into something undefined but functional. Not romantic partners, but more than just friends, bound together by complicated history and future responsibility. We attended birthing classes together, awkwardly navigating instructor assumptions about our relationship status. "People can think whatever they want," Kevin said after one particularly uncomfortable exchange. "We know our truth, messy as it is." His steady presence became unexpectedly comforting. Unlike James, who I'd hurt irreparably, Kevin shared responsibility for our situation. We could acknowledge our mutual poor judgment without the relationship-destroying imbalance of betrayal. The baby, whom I'd decided to name Lily, became my center. Each ultrasound, each kick, each hiccup reminded me that regardless of her complicated origins, she was wholly herself, not a mistake or a consequence, but a person deserving unconditional love and stable parents. At 30 weeks pregnant, I received an unexpected email from James, the first direct communication in months that wasn't about practical arrangements. "I've been seeing a therapist," he wrote. "She's helping me process everything. I want you to know I don't hate you, Ellie. I'm still grieving what we lost, but I'm working toward forgiveness, not for your sake, but for mine. I hope you're taking care of yourself and the baby." The message cracked something open inside me. Not hope for reconciliation, which I knew was impossible, but possibility of eventual peace. I responded with similar honesty, apologizing again while acknowledging that some breaches can't be repaired, expressing gratitude for the years we'd shared and the grace with which he'd handled our separation. We began exchanging occasional messages after that, never about us, but about mutual friends or articles we'd both find interesting, small threads maintaining minimal connection without reopening wounds. It wasn't friendship exactly, but it was considerably more civilized than our situation warranted. As my due date approached, preparations accelerated. My sister helped finish the nursery. Kevin assembled furniture and installed the car seat. My parents visited, bringing handmade blankets and tentative excitement about their first grandchild, despite the circumstances. The most unexpected healing came from connecting with other women whose lives hadn't followed conventional scripts. Through an online group for single mothers by circumstance, I found people who understood complexity. Women navigating co-parenting with exes, women using sperm donors, women whose partners had died during pregnancy. Their stories weren't identical to mine, but the common thread was clear. There are countless ways to build a family, and children thrive on love rather than adherence to traditional structures. One woman from the group, Diane, became a close friend. 5 years ahead of me on a similar journey, she offered practical advice without judgment. The first year is survival mode, she told me over coffee. Lower your expectations, accept all help offered, and remember that this phase is temporary. The relationship dynamics will settle eventually. Her teenage daughter, happy and well-adjusted despite complicated family origins, became living proof that children could thrive outside conventional family structures. The most significant setback came at 36 weeks, when I ran into James at our favorite neighborhood restaurant. I was having dinner with Kevin discussing last-minute birth preparations. James was with a woman I didn't recognize, attractive, probably early 30s, laughing at something he said. The sight of him, looking healthier and happier than when we'd last spoken, knocked the wind from me. Kevin noticed immediately, following my gaze to where James sat across the restaurant. "We should go," Kevin suggested quietly. "No," I forced myself to breathe normally. "We were here first. I can handle this." But when James finally noticed us, the flash of pain across his features proved I was wrong. He said something to his companion, then approached our table alone. "Ellie," he nodded, then turned slightly. "Kevin?" "James." Kevin's tone was neutral, respectful. "Good to see you." The absurdity of polite small talk between my husband and the father of my child struck me suddenly, and a sound escaped me, half laugh, half sob. "I'm sorry," James said. "We can leave." "Don't," I managed. "Really, we're almost finished anyway." His eyes dropped to my pronounced belly, then quickly away. "You look well, healthy." "Thanks, you too." I gestured vaguely toward his table. "Is that—" "Colleague," he supplied. "Just work." I nodded, relieved for reasons I couldn't articulate. "Well," he shifted awkwardly. "Take care of yourself, both of you." After he returned to his table, I excused myself to the restroom, where I spent 10 minutes trying to compose myself, one hand braced against the sink, the other cradling my active baby. The brief interaction had unleashed grief I thought I'd processed, not for our romantic relationship, which I'd accepted was irreparable, but for the friendship and history wiped away by circumstances. Kevin found me waiting near the exit, having paid our bill. "You okay?" Not really. Honesty had become our foundation, but I will be. That night, alone in bed, I felt Lily moving restlessly inside me. "Your life is complicated before you've even arrived," I whispered to her. "But you are so loved. By me, by your dad, even in his way by James. We're all doing our best with an impossible situation." As if in response, she gave a particularly strong kick. I chose to interpret it as agreement. Lily Abigail Bennett arrived at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, after 26 hours of labor that tested every limit of my endurance. Kevin stayed throughout, awkwardly supportive, but determined to be present. When they placed her on my chest, dark-haired, red-faced, perfectly formed, the world realigned around her existence. "She's beautiful," Kevin whispered, awe evident in his voice as he tentatively touched her tiny hand. "She looks like you." But we both recognized the truth. She had his eyes, his chin, The genetic reality now had physical manifestation, undeniable and perfect. The early weeks passed in a blur of sleeplessness and adjustment. Kevin visited daily, sometimes staying overnight on the couch to help with feedings. My sister remained with us for the first month, a buffer and support system as we established new patterns. My parents visited for 2 weeks, falling hopelessly in love with their granddaughter, despite lingering discomfort with the circumstances. James sent flowers to the hospital with a simple card. "Congratulations on your daughter. Wishing you both health and happiness." The gesture, unnecessary but kind, exemplified the man I'd married, capable of compassion despite personal pain. By Lily's 3-month milestone, our new normal had begun taking shape. Kevin had fully relocated to Chicago, living close enough for daily involvement but maintaining separate households. We developed a loose co-parenting schedule, with Lily primarily residing with me but Kevin taking her for increasingly longer periods as she grew. Our relationship evolved into something I'd never anticipated. Not romantic partners, but deeply connected co-parents. Building a friendship strengthened rather than destroyed by our complicated history. The attraction that had flared that forgotten night never reemerged. Our focus entirely on providing Lily with stability and love rather than traditional family structure. "We're lucky, you know," Kevin observed one evening as we sat together watching Lily sleep. "Not every co-parenting situation starts with 15 years of friendship as foundation." He was right. The underlying trust we'd built long before becoming parents helped navigate the inevitable challenges of raising a child across households. When disagreements arose about parenting approaches or schedules, we could communicate without the poisonous resentment that often characterizes post-relationship co-parenting. The divorce from James became final when Lily was 4 months old. I signed the papers with a mixture of sadness and acceptance, mourning the end of a chapter while recognizing it had closed months earlier. That evening, I wrote him a letter I never sent, expressing everything I couldn't articulate during our breakup: my genuine remorse, appreciation for how he'd handled an impossible situation, acknowledgement of the pain I'd caused, and wishes for his future happiness. The writing process proved unexpectedly cathartic. I didn't need him to read my words. I needed to organize them for myself, to integrate this experience into my continuing life story rather than compartmentalizing it as too painful to examine. At Lily's first birthday, surrounded by friends who'd stood by us and family who'd overcome initial shock to embrace our unconventional situation, I realized how profoundly this year had transformed me. The woman who'd sat devastated in that genetic counselor's office no longer existed. In her place stood someone more resilient, more compassionate, more aware of life's complexity. 2 weeks after that party, I received an unexpected text from James, the first in several months. "I'm moving to Seattle next month. Work promotion. Wanted you to hear it from me rather than through mutual friends." We met for coffee the following week, our first intentional meeting since the separation. The man across from me looked both familiar and like a stranger, our shared history simultaneously connecting and separating us. "I'm happy for you," I told him, genuinely meaning it. "Seattle is beautiful." "Thanks." He studied me for a moment. "You look good, Ellie. Motherhood suits you." "It's been a journey," I acknowledged. Not the one I expected, but meaningful nonetheless. We talked for nearly 2 hours, carefully navigating around painful topics, while finding surprising comfort in shared memories and updates on mutual friends. As we prepared to leave, he hesitated. "Can I ask you something? Something I've wondered since everything happened?" I nodded, apprehensive but willing. "Are you and Kevin together now, romantically?" "No," I answered truthfully. "We're co-parents, friends, nothing more." He absorbed this, expression unreadable. "I always wondered if there had been something between you all along." There wasn't. I met his eyes directly. What happened was an isolated incident fueled by alcohol and bad judgment, not hidden feelings. "I believe you," he said after a moment. "That actually makes it harder in some ways, but I believe you." As we said goodbye outside the cafe, he surprised me with a brief, awkward hug. "Take care of yourself, Ellie, and Lily too. You too, James. I hope Seattle brings good things. Watching him walk away, I felt a chapter truly close, not just legally, but emotionally. The guilt would never completely disappear, nor should it, but its weight had lessened to something I could carry without being crushed beneath it. Now, as Lily approaches her second birthday, I sometimes marvel at how completely life can transform through circumstances we neither choose nor control. The blood test that revealed an inconvenient truth also forced growth I might have otherwise avoided, about responsibility, forgiveness, particularly self-forgiveness, and the complex ways humans can hurt and heal each other. Kevin and I continue developing our cooperative parenting approach. He recently bought a house with a backyard just 10 minutes from mine, establishing permanent roots in Chicago. We celebrate holidays together, create consistent routines across households, and occasionally catch ourselves in moments of unexpected joy amidst what should be an impossible situation. Last month, I met someone, a divorced father in Lily's playgroup. Our coffee dates have been comfortable, honest from the beginning about our complicated histories. He knows my story, understands the priority Lily will always represent, respects the co-parenting relationship with Kevin. Whether this connection develops further remains uncertain, but the possibility itself represents healing I once thought impossible. The most profound transformation involves my relationship with truth. I once believed life progressed linearly toward clear milestones: marriage, children, happily ever after. I now understand that meaningful life emerges from how we respond to unexpected devastation as much as from our careful plans. That genuine integrity isn't about never making mistakes, but about facing their consequences with courage and responsibility. Most importantly, I've learned that families come in countless configurations beyond traditional structures. Lily has two parents who adore her, extended families who have overcome initial shock to embrace her, and a community that supports our unconventional situation. By objective measures, she's thriving, meeting developmental milestones, securely attached, surrounded by consistent love. Sometimes I look at her sleeping face and marvel at the cosmic collision of circumstances that created her existence. In my darkest moments during pregnancy, I questioned whether bringing her into such complicated circumstances was fair. Now I understand that every life begins within existing complexities, some just more visible than others. If I could somehow return to that genetic counselor's office knowing everything that would follow, would I choose a different path? Would I decline the blood test, remain blissfully ignorant, raise a child believing James was her father? The question haunts me occasionally, usually during sleepless nights when doubt creeps in. But watching Lily laugh as Kevin pushes her on the swings, or seeing her concentrate intensely while stacking blocks, I know the answer. Truth, however painful, creates the only foundation solid enough to build a life of authentic connection. Living honestly within complex reality serves her better than thriving within comfortable fiction. The prenatal blood test didn't create our situation. It merely revealed a truth that already existed. The revelation shattered the life I'd planned but enabled the one I now live. Messy, complicated, but fundamentally authentic. For that painful gift of truth, I've finally found gratitude. TLDR. A routine prenatal blood test revealed my husband couldn't possibly be my baby's father due to blood type incompatibility. After investigation, I discovered I'd had a drunken one-night stand with my longtime friend Kevin that I barely remembered. My marriage ended, but Kevin and I developed a healthy co-parenting relationship. 2 years later, we're raising our daughter between our homes, finding unexpected strength and growth through circumstances neither of us would have chosen. Edit. Thank you all for the overwhelming support. To address some common questions, yes, James did eventually admit to everything when confronted with the evidence. No, we never reconciled. And for those asking about Kevin, we're still figuring things out, but he's been incredibly supportive and wants to be involved in his daughter's life. Update. 2 years later, Lily just turned 2 and is thriving with our co-parenting arrangement. Kevin and I have maintained a strong friendship and parenting partnership without romantic involvement. James and I occasionally exchange cordial messages. He's remarried and seems happy in Seattle. I've recently started dating again and am cautiously optimistic. Most importantly, I found peace with our unconventional family structure and the unexpected journey that created it.